Now to the dramatic series of events in Haiti that has drawn attention from around the world. Nearly 2 weeks after the president was assassinated in the middle of the night and also tortured, there's been a change in power. The new revelations that the masterminds behind his killing may not be behind bars tonight. Journalist James Pierre with Haitian TV and radio joining us live. You spoke with the elections minister, and he shared with you some of these surprising revelations about the people behind this assassination of the former president. What did he tell you?
Very disturbing allegations. He told us that based on information that he has received from local police officers on the ground. And also remember that the FBI also conducting investigation and have documents from the residence of President Jovenel Moïse. Now he has doubts. He believes that the criminals are still at large in Haiti.
So do we know who they may be?
He doesn't say actually who they are, but he said on record that the president had many enemies, including rich people in Haiti that the president didn't want to renew contract for. He also mentioned that on the political side, the president also had enemies inside of his own party.
Okay, so what is being done to try to track down these assassins?
That's the question, because now we have a new government. The former prime minister of Haiti, Claude, actually stepped down. Now we have a new interim prime minister, Dr. Henry, coming in with a new objective. His mission is to organize presidential and legislative elections soon by the end of the year. The question remains, will he now make the investigation his focus of the mandate that he has before the end of the year?
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because the Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, seen as a less contentious leader than Moïse was, but the concern is there has been a lot of influence from other countries, the U.S., one of them. What does this do for stability, and how are the Haitian people reacting to that?
Remember that under pressure by the international powers, the interim prime minister, Claude, had to resign. And now you have the new interim prime minister, Dr. Henry. His mission is actually a total different. He's trying to get a consensus of different parties in Haiti to form his new government body. They see him more as the soft guy, as the one to lead the country to new upcoming elections. And I spoke as well to the Haiti's elections minister, who told me that he had many doubts that we will organize elections by the end of the year.
Right, and I understand the focus right now is a unity government. So with these potential assassins still at large tonight, James, the funeral for President Moïse is scheduled for July 23rd. Are there any concerns ahead of that service?
Many concerns so far, because remember that Haiti is a country well known by any spontaneous manifestations, protests on the streets. Now the local police of the northern side of Haiti said they are ready to help the funeral. The family of former president Jovenel Moïse said they don't need any money from the government. They will take care of everything. On the other side, you have the government saying, okay, we'll still organize some ceremonies for the former president. It seems that there's still some misunderstanding of how this is going to go on the 23rd.
And James, I'm out of time, but real quickly, what's the condition of the former First Lady who was shot in that assassination?
She's in stable condition now. She's back in Haiti, wearing bulletproof vest on a country where she's still in power. The government of his former husband is still in power, but you can tell that she doesn't trust anybody.
Well, shedding some important light, James Pierre, tonight on a situation that still leaves us with many questions, including a motive, and if the people of Haiti are getting the full story on exactly what happened. James, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
On the brink of making